Good afternoon and welcome everyone. On behalf of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, as always, we hope that you are all joining us feeling safe and healthy during this unprecedented time. COVID-19 has certainly had a significant impact, not only across the globe nationally, but in this region in particular. And here at the Chamber, we continue to try to be a source of information, a convener, and a voice and advocate for Greater Boston's business community and all of its employees. One of the major industries in Massachusetts is, of course, our academic industry. Boston and the Boston region is home to some of the world's most prestigious colleges and universities, and they are a critical element of our economic infrastructure here in the Commonwealth. Just to put that in perspective, Boston alone hosts 35 colleges, universities, community colleges, welcoming about 140,000 students each year. If you expand that to Greater Boston, the number grows to 65 colleges and universities, welcoming 430,000, and then Commonwealth-wide, 114 colleges and universities that attract 600,000 students each year. And the employment and jobs created by this industry is quite significant, over 100,000 jobs created, significant economic impact. And as we think about reopening and the path forward, in terms of restarting the economy, and you look back in history at economic crisis and other forms of downturn, certainly the colleges, universities, and the academic industry has played a key role in all of that. So in light of all that, today we're going to focus on colleges and universities and feature 5 local college university presidents who share their thoughts on the current situation, the future of higher education, and what their respective institutions are thinking about in this moment. Before I get started, I do want to flag that today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page after the presentation. For those of you that have questions, when we get to the question and answer period, you can submit those questions using the chat feature on your screen, or if you choose to, you can email questions to Chamber Programs, all one word with an S, Chamber Programs @bostonchamber.com. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome our college presidents, starting with the Honorable Marty Meehan, the 27th president of the University of Massachusetts. President Meehan is a former member of the United States House of Representatives, having served 14 years in Congress. President Meehan has established a national reputation for his leadership skills, guiding the 5 campuses of the UMass system to new heights, achieving significant milestones for our public university system. Also joining today, we have Dr. Pam Ettinger, president of Bunker Hill Community College, who brings more than 25 years of experience in higher education. Dr. Ettinger leads Boston's largest community college. Dr. Ettinger was honored as a champion of change by the Obama White House. President Ettinger's leadership has touched the lives of more than 19,000 incredibly diverse students who enroll annually. Next, we have President Joseph Ayoun of Northeastern University. President Ayoun is an internationally known voice on the value of global and experiential education, and an author focused on reimagining education in the face of technology. His innovative thought leadership and ability to align Northeastern's research with that of major global initiatives makes him an asset to Boston's higher education community, as well as today's conversation. We're also welcoming Dr. Robert Brown, president of Boston University. As the head of BU since 2005, President Brown's exceptional leadership skills have propelled the school's position as a leading private research university and deepened their commitment to quality. Dr. Brown is a fixture on numerous boards and councils focused on academic research, engineering, arts, and sciences. Finally, we're joined by Dr. Lee Pelton, the 12th president of Emerson College and our moderator for today's conversation. Dr. Pelton is an internationally known speaker and writer who also emphasizes the value of liberal arts education and the importance of leadership development, civic engagement, diversity, and inclusion. It is Dr. Pelton's bold vision that is positioning Emerson as a global hub for arts, communication, and liberal arts, both at the Boston campus and the Los Angeles campus. Thank you all for taking the time to join us, as well as the over 1,000 participants that have registered for this session today. Now we'll kick it off, and Lee, before I turn it over to you to play the role of moderator, I'd like to ask you to give us an overview of what you're thinking about as you're contemplating the future of the Boston and the Los Angeles campus. Dr. Pelton.
Well, thank you, Jim. And, you know, we're like all of the institutions and the presidents that are here with us today, we're in a process of trying to determine the structure of the fall term and the shape of our curriculum. Emerson is a multi-campus college, not only in Boston, but we have a campus in LA since 2013. We also have a campus in the Netherlands, a campus in Paris, and opening up a campus in Switzerland and Australia very soon. So, you know, I think we're making our way through this. We haven't made announcements. I know that some of my colleagues have already made announcements, but it's our hope to have some in-person classes and curriculum in the fall term. Those will probably be, you know, complementary to some remote learning, and we hope to make our announcement within the next 2.5 weeks. You know, our campus in Los Angeles, I call it it's a study abroad program in a foreign country called LA, and by that I mean it's our students. We're not in competition with UCLA or USC or any other great institutions in LA, but these are our students, mostly seniors, who go there and launch their careers in Los Angeles through a traditional curriculum, but also through internships. And our program in the Netherlands is a liberal arts focused program, focused mostly on Central Europe. So, Jim, would you like me to start? I think you're on mute, so maybe not. I will. Why don't
The show is yours, Dr. Pelton.
All right, great, thank you. Well, you know, to my colleagues, as Jim noted, higher education is critically important to the Massachusetts economy. In the Commonwealth, we spend about $25 billion in our operating budgets. We in salary and benefits, it's over $10 billion annually, and over $4 billion in federal and sponsored research. So we are a significant business, as it were, in the Commonwealth. I think the one thing that we've all learned is that we are living and will be living in this COVID environment for quite some time. It will not end with the fall term. It may not even end with the spring term. And so the issue for us is how are we going to adapt, like all other businesses and individuals, to this new reality. So I'm going to open it up by asking all of you I know the question that is on everyone's mind is what higher education will look like this fall. Each institution is taking a different approach to developing and communicating their plans. And I'd like to ask each of you, as of today, what do you believe is in store for your institution in the fall and beyond? We'll get into the details of all of this after hearing each of your high-level thoughts. So who would like to go first?
Great.
Pam, would you like to go first?
Well, okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So Bunker Hill is based in Charlestown and Chelsea, and it's a commuter college. Our campus really extends to the farthest point from which our students travel, which is about 8-mile radius. So no Switzerland, no Paris, but very much the center of Boston. So our dynamics for fall is going to be tied very much to the dynamics of the city and the transportation spine that's going to be the MBTA and the buses. So we are planning that a majority of our classes will be hybrid, remote, or online, with a smaller number of on-ground classes. And of course, our on-ground labs like allied health or culinary or laboratory sciences really needs to be on campus and they're hands-on. So some of our support staff will also continue to work online, all with the goals of making physical distancing and safety possible on the Charlestown and the Chelsea campuses.
Thank you. Joseph or Marty? Or
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lee. You know, we are like you. We are, you know, we have many campuses in the United States. We are in Seattle, we are in Silicon Valley, we are in Charlotte, and we are in Virginia. We also have 2 campuses in Canada, Toronto and Vancouver, and we have also a full campus in London. So our goal is to reopen in the fall. And here in Boston, our plan is to follow the guidelines set up by the governor and the city and the mayor. And we are going to have gradual reopening with the goal of having full reopening in the fall. But in order to do that, it will not be business as usual. Actually, you know, our top priority will always be the health and well-being of our community. This is not negotiable. We are going to do our own testing. We are going to do our own tracking. And we are going to look at the density of everything in the university. We are going to look at the density of the classrooms and reduce it. We are going to look at the density of the dorms and reduce it too. And we already secured 2,000 additional beds in order to achieve that. And we are going to look at the density of our labs and of all our operations. That's what we have been doing. That's what we are working on. And we believe that this is achievable, and that's what we are be doing. And we are in some ways, you know, throughout this COVID-19 crisis, we learned, and I'm sure you did the same, Lee, because we had to close our Seattle campus first because Seattle was hit first. And this was a learning experience for us. So it is not going to be one size fits all. We have to look at the community we live in, see what the situation is, and how to ensure and work very hard with the community to ensure the well-being and the safety, not only of our students, faculty, and staff, but the well-being of the community as a whole. And that's the plan.
So Lee, UMass is 5 campuses, 75,000 students. It's really difficult to predict what will happen in September. I listen to Dr. Fauci, as all of us do, and the other experts. But we are preparing for all options. We're preparing within the social distancing guidelines for how we could open up our campuses. UMass Boston is largely a commuter campus, a lot of similarities with Pam's institutions. President Bob Brown and I served on the governor's advisory committee to look at phases of reopening. The first phase of that involves research. As you mentioned, Lee, Massachusetts universities do over $4 billion worth of research. UMass is $683 million of that research. So we want to, and much of that research, by the way, is focusing on how to get the economy moving again, focusing on new emerging technologies, focused on finding vaccines and cures to COVID-19. So first step is to get the research operation up and running. And we're going to prepare for everything from online education to being on campus to hybrid. And it's difficult to predict how that all will happen. UMass has had a robust online program for about 20 years. And we're looking, part of our process is looking at how to make online learning even better. What is our experiences with taking 75,000 students, putting them into virtual classrooms within the matter of 2 weeks, which was, you know, all the universities done a pretty good job at this, but we're also looking at how we can make that experience better. So I can't predict exactly what will happen in September, but I can tell you that we are committed to online, some hybrid, having people back. We're committed to a accessible, affordable, high quality education, regardless of what that mode takes in September.
Well, thank you, Lee, and it's really a pleasure to be with everyone this afternoon. I don't know what other Zoom call I'd be on if I wasn't on this one. As you know, we're a major research university with a large footprint in Boston, but also sites around the world. I'm going to only speak about the Boston campuses because there's just too much uncertainty in all of our other sites. You know, the governor's plan with the 4 phases, I think, sets out the blueprint. The first phase is for all of us. And as Marty said, that first phase is just beginning, which is the repopulation of our clinical and research operations, which are very important to us, both in terms of as a research university and as having major medical and dental and public health clinical operations that will begin to come up as we start phase 1. The phase that we're all talking about, and the one that's of interest to people, is phase 3, which is the repopulation of our campuses. And I want to go back to what Joseph said, which I think is really important. One is that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty that we have. It's very hard and to be very precise. But one of the things you can see, and we've seen since we've been working on this for the last 2 months with the recovery group, is the number of protocols we're going to need in place to repopulate our traditional campus are going to be large and detailed. Testing is going to be an essential part of this. We'll have an announcement later this week. We are in the process of standing up our own testing facility at the university. Also important are going to be symptom tracking, contact tracing, which we're going to have to do, not relying on others. And then finally, the ability to isolate suspected or real COVID patients within our environment. But those aren't going to be the biggest change. The biggest changes are going to be in the living conditions, the way our residential campuses are going to work, how our students are going to have to kind of segregate themselves into what I will call households, smaller groups, and try to decrease the amount of mixing among our students. We're reconceiving the classroom experience. And probably the biggest announcement we've made, and I want to distinguish between remote learning and online learning. We're absolutely committed to the residential campus education model. We believe that's what we're equipped to do. That's what we do very, very well. When we moved into this emergency remote learning model, which is really a synchronous remote learning model, it's not an asynchronous online educating model. We did that with incredible amount of effort. We see that we're going to have that same flexibility going into the fall, and we've already announced a relatively massive move of all of our master's and doctoral professional programs to what we call simultaneous residential remote learning, where we'll be able to deliver both simultaneously, both in the classroom. You can imagine a cohort of students that are both in the classroom and there's another cohort of students who are not, they're remote. And then using technology and additional support and other capabilities for the faculty to be able to teach both cohorts simultaneously. We think that flexibility is going to be absolutely needed because there's going to be cohorts of students who are not able to come back to campus in September, I know one of the things we'll end up talking about at some point is international students and visa situation. Students who are ill or have been isolated because we suspect them to be ill. We want them to be able to continue their education. And finally, there'll be students who are just worried about the classroom environment and actually, even with the de-densification and everything else, don't want to be in that environment. So we're going to have to be more flexible than we've ever been in the way we offer education.
Right, thank you, Bob. You know, the survey that we did and the surveys that I've seen nationally that say that students who were enrolled in residential colleges overwhelmingly want to come back in the fall in an in-person environment. Faculty seem to be less comfortable with coming back than the students. I think we've all seen those. You know, I guess this is, so a French philosopher once said, the future is not what it used to be. And I think that's where we are. We've seen all of the futurists come out as they did in 2008, and whenever there's a crisis in higher education, and they talk about you know, the fundamental changes to the business model for higher education. What they don't often understand is that change at a college or university is like trying to move a cemetery. It's a really very hard thing to do. But I'd like to ask each of you, how do you imagine the future of your own college or colleges and university broadly after the, you know, the post-pandemic, when we get to the new normal, as it's outlined in the governor's report? What's it going to look like? Do you see massive changes in how you, in your business model, in your curriculum? Or?
So I would start that off, Lee.
I'm going to ask you,
if you're, let me talk about a world in which COVID is, there is an effective vaccine, which is sometime in the future. And what we have learned from this is two things, I believe. One is higher education is much more flexible than anyone ever imagined, right? In fact, much more flexible than we imagined this. Our faculty are more innovative and creative and can pivot under extreme circumstances in ways we never imagined. The second thing we're going to understand is the incredible value of the residential education model. That the model, the traditional model of bringing 18 to 21, 22-year-olds to a campus and having them work with each other and interact with each other, and not only in a classroom environment, but in studios and laboratories and other facilities, is going to be incredibly highly valued on the other side of this. And I'm struck by an email someone sent me after a town meeting last week when we were talking about this with 2,000 employees. It was a very short email and it had two sentences. It said, "Keep my daughter safe, get her out of my house." And I think, you know, I really believe that there's going to be a fundamental understanding now of all of the things a residential education does, that beside delivering high quality content, which we're still doing.
I can take a stab at that, at your question, is what's going to change, what will the future look like? Another philosopher who was local, and it's not me, said the future is already with us in many ways. So what are we seeing? We are seeing that higher education is moving towards personalization of the education. We have to take into account the needs and the journey of every student, every learner with us. Whereas traditionally, it has been, you know, the tempo was out tempo, the calendar was out calendar. You know, let me give you an example about our calendar. We are going to talk, as Bob said, about international students. Well, we are not going to expect all international students to be with us in the fall in September, which means that we have to be ready for them to insert themselves at any time they are willing and able to do it. And this is true for our domestic students, which means that, for instance, all our courses are going to be delivered in a synchronous way, and they were going to be available in an asynchronous way. That's going to allow any student to join us at any time. The second thing, we have built apps that will allow every student to determine her journey, her learning objectives, and work with us based on that. So it's not going to be one size fits all. We are seeing that the impact of the COVID-19 is to accelerate this move towards personalization of higher education, and that's good. It is no longer to be, I am giving the course today, I am the center of the world. No, you, the learners, are the center of the world, and we are going to work with you based on your journey, based on your needs, and based on your goals. That's a fundamental change that I see. Similarly, in terms of research, I see that every college, every university has research that is impacting the nation, impacting the world. You know, we have our labs, and, you know, and the we is a collective we. I'm not talking about Northeastern only, but our labs are helping with the COVID-19 crisis at multiple levels. And therefore, I think that, you know, this, the impact of research is being felt on a daily basis, which means that research that is user-inspired, that has an impact on society, is going to become even more paramount. This traditional dichotomy between fundamental and applied research is gone, and it, you know, its demise, it's accelerated by the fact that society has the crisis and society is looking for solutions, and universities have been at the forefront in providing these solutions. So it's this engagement with the world that universities have is being accelerated, and this personalization of education, which ultimately benefits the learner, is with us, and it has been accelerated.
Thank you.
Lee, with all these, folks are quoting people, I want to quote John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who once said that change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future. I think there are going to be dramatic changes in higher education. Yes, there will always be people that want that four-year experience on a campus, but the reality is, I think online education is going to become more and more important. We have 1 million people in Massachusetts before COVID-19 that had some college education but hadn't attained a degree. I think that we're going to have to develop more in terms of robust services for online students, and I see online growing. I think higher education needs to be more nimble. We have to find a way to make, I agree with the comments that have been made of how difficult it can be for a college or university to embrace change. We need to get better at that. The final comment I would make is that all the comments about Massachusetts, all the colleges and universities that we have, and if you look at New England, here's the reality. If you look at the demographics in New England, and I don't think any of the all the colleges that are represented on this panel have had growth in enrollment. But if you look at Massachusetts as a whole or New England, I don't think there's any way demographically to support the same number of colleges and universities. And in fact, I think that this crisis is going to accelerate the challenges of many tuition-dependent institutions that don't have large endowments. And I think that Massachusetts needs to figure out a way to make sure that those changes in the consolidation or closing of colleges and universities is done in a way that's effective for the people of Massachusetts, but also that we collaborate more to prepare for that, because that day is coming. I look at the challenge over the next years. Not all colleges and universities are going to be existing by the time this is over. So that's a couple of points that I wanted to make.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, our industry was already in a throes of a market correction, and I think you're right. This will accelerate it. You know, and I'm going to ask you, Pam, to respond to this question first, but it's for everybody. This pandemic has been described as an equal opportunity pandemic, but that is not true.
No.
Because it has impacted different groups differently. So I'd like to know how all of you, I'm going to start with you, Pam, to talk about what are your considerations when thinking about the impact of this on the students in our population that are first generation students, who are undocumented students, who are students of color, students with children, and underserved groups, from underserved groups.
So I don't think there's any equal opportunity in here at all. All the inequities that we know that were sort of bubbling beneath the surface is broken open. I have, in the 25, 30 years of been in education, have never seen such stresses on students. Everything from, you know, this huge switch online, which holds great opportunity for us into the future, was one of the worst things I've ever experienced. To take 1,700 sections and convert them to online over 2 weeks was tough on the faculty. But it was tougher on students because they don't have laptops, Wi-Fi, a quiet place to study. They're taking care of kids at home. They are being teachers to those children. And all the while suffering all of the same basic needs, the lack of enough food and nutrition, housing, all of those things have come to a point. And I'll take the city of Chelsea. The city of Chelsea is where our second campus is. It is one of the hotspots, 50% Latino, underserved, high degree of poverty. And we're finding that students sometimes just simply disappear because they can't get online. So we've ended up purchasing a lot of the technical equipment and delivering groceries to these students. My fear is that the students who are truly in stress, we're not hearing from, and they will go away, and they will go away permanently. With our four-year colleagues, students may take a gap year, or they may take a semester off, but you know that their parents, their support system, their the expectations of them will bring them back, albeit later. I'm not so sure that I can say that for all of our students. So that's the piece that we struggle. And I agree with Marty that online education is our future. And those students who are trying to get online are going to need something else other than technology. They're going to need the holistic student support that wraps around them, that makes online education work. And until we get there, until we have universal broadband, there will be no equity in education for me, not for my students.
Great.
That made everybody quiet.
Yeah, no.
My apologies.
I would just
there was no
agree
follow-up.
with what Pam said. I mean, we see this among our considerable Pell Grant student population is that it has not been equitable because the environments that they've gone back into are not the environments that are conducive on every case for that kind of learning environment and that they had in the residential campus setting. Right. You know, the support structures that we can offer everyone residentially, right, don't work nearly as well in the non-residential model.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just
Go
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Melty. You are my senior.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that at UMass Boston, we have an interim chancellor who is a nationally recognized expert on this subject. And one of the things we've done at UMass is we've committed resources to raising money to buy laptops for all students that were affected by this. But I couldn't agree more with Pam. One of the things, I worked hard with members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, as well as Speaker Pelosi's office and Chuck Schumer's office, to make sure the Federal CARES Act provided significant support for these students. but we've only just scratched the surface of it. The House passed a bill with $26 billion for public higher education, $500 billion for states, but it's tied up in the Senate. I'm worried about how we're going to meet these students looking into the future, because I don't think the state is going to have the money to invest in this. But this represents a major challenge for this country. If we leave these folks behind, we're not going to have economic prosperity in this country. This is an essential part of getting the economy going again and making sure these students get what they need. And many of these students have been forced out of work. They're part of these statistics, greatest unemployment since the Great Depression. They're these students, and we have to take care of them.
Yeah. So listen, we're moving along, Joseph. We're moving along at a clip, and so I want to be able to ask each of you an individual question and ask that you give a very crisp answer because we're gonna move to our audience questions right after this. You at Northeastern, you have the celebrated co-op program, otherwise known as a cooperative education. It's one of the best and largest in the world. And how are you thinking about that going forward?
Great. So co-op is about experiencing the real world of work. And the real world of work today is remote. Over 75% of our co-ops now have moved to be online, to be remote. So that's, the employers are doing that and are getting our students to have their co-op experience online. And we are integrating the co-op experience with the classroom experience. But what is interesting is that we have a global network of 3,000 co-op employers worldwide. And what we have seen is the following. We have seen it in 2008, and we are seeing the beginning of that now. That in 2008, with the recession, when employers were shrinking their talent pool, they still came to us and said, we need co-op students. Why? Because we need a pipeline for talent that is budding, that is growing, that is innovative, that is creative. And so what we are seeing is somewhat similar situation now, in the sense that even places that are laying off people or furloughing people are still in need of a pipeline for talent. And at the same, because the co-op students are flexible, with the fact that we have 3,000 students is helping, and it's positioning them to be ready for a job after their co-op experience. But let me go beyond that. Even as we speak, we have places in the economy that are really now asking for more co-op students. Let me give you an example. Telemedicine. We received calls from companies doing telemedicine saying, can you add 25 students and have 25 more co-op students with us? Another one said similar things. So sectors of the economy are still growing. And so therefore you are seeing a recalibration and repurposing of some of these co-op opportunities. And that's what we're seeing. And that's interesting, because that's what the co-op is all about, is the real work today is moving in different direction, and it's remote, and co-ops are moving in this direction too.
Great, thank you. Hey, Bob, I have a question for you, and you talked very well about having to pivot very quickly in the use of technology. But there's another group out there for some of us. These are the guidance and counselors and community counselors, and of course parents. And how's your college? I mean, how's your university thinking about how to manage these university visits and so on that normally occur in the fall and the spring?
Well, it's a fascinating pivot, Lee, and I think everyone on this call's done this. I was just amazed at how our admissions processes have run. both for our undergraduate and our graduate professional programs, through the support that we've been able to give them through our marketing and communications and the IT people we had. They pivoted to all online virtual events with great outcomes. And it was just amazing to watch. And it kind of goes back a bit to what Marty was saying. This is where our students live anyway. They live in these online spaces and places, and we've been able to reach them. It's not the same. It's not the same as them doing the campus visits. And the communication has to be balanced very carefully, not to overwhelm and be informative. I think that when people ask me this all the time about how to keep communicating, and I don't know why they think we do it well, but that people do. I think people right now, we're in a period where people understand the complexity of the situation we're dealing with. We've moved through the, can't you give me an answer, to, can you tell me what things are going to be like? What are the possibilities? And I think this is where universities should really shine. What we are in society is the honest brokers of information. We say this all the time from our research community and from all of the seminars and other things we host. I think this is really a gut check for us, because I think we have to be honest brokers about information about ourselves at a time when that information may not be the best painless information that we're putting out at any one time. Because we live on public trust. People trust their children to us, they trust their educations to us. So I think it's really an interesting time for that. And the virtual world allows us to do it. It's the content that matters.
Hey, Pam, you have a lot of students who are also parents. Can you, how are you managing that in this current environment? So you're on mute, Pam.
Yeah.
You need to unmute. There you go.
There's a large part of me that's invested in all of these processes, and I struggle along with my students. But there's a part of me that's really amused by the fact that the rest of the world is finally realizing what it feels like to be a student parent, to have kids at home, to have to juggle all of these different pieces. Because we have such a large adult population in our student body, we have been pushing ourselves towards a more equitable schedule anyway. So we've been trying to get more remote and online moving even before the COVID outbreak. So this pushed us really into the next phase. A lot of our students are in that small number who have sort of given up for the moment. We have done everything from allowing for a pass-fail grade, allowing for a longer withdrawal period, allowing for incomplete to be finished over the summer, and providing support. Basically everything that we can do to say to a student or a student parent who's got multiple obligations that we understand, we're compassionate, learning is lifelong. We should not let this particular point in the outbreak define your entire academic career. And to keep them with us. I think that relationship with us, whether it's academic or it is student support or if it's emotional support, we want to be there. So we kept all of the services open. We kept the food pantry open virtually. We were doing food deliveries. We're doing everything we can to acknowledge the fact that they may leave now, but they need to come back. And the changes that they have will affect more than just them. It'll affect their children and their family. It's a very difficult time to navigate. I wish I can tell you we've got all the solutions, we've got them supported, but we don't. But we're calling 800, 1,000 students at any one time to make sure that they get that touch. And we're hoping that emotional connection will be stronger than the virus.
Thank you very much. Hey, Marty, I have a question for you, because you talked about the future being electronic. I guess that's the word I want to use. And what's your thinking about professional development training? As I say, what's your thinking about making sure that the delivery of online learning is really the best that it can possibly be? And what are you doing on your campus, or would you do on your campus to promote that excellence?
Well, about a year ago, I had the state of UMass address that I made, and I said that we were making a commitment to providing cutting edge online services for working adults in Massachusetts and beyond. And I think that this virus and this crisis makes that even more important. We're looking at the best examples of wraparound services in online education. We're looking at models from across the country, and we're going to develop a partnership with an online university where we can deliver the best possible services and the best content that we can, and make sure that it's available. It's amazing how many working adults, they can go to class at 10 o'clock at night until 11:30 at night, or in some instances, different times. So we're going to be very proactive in terms of expanding our online offerings of certificates. Joseph at Northeastern are the model when it comes to experiential learning. But I think many of these adults that are working, we need to tailor programs for them, but also for the companies and places they work for. Therefore, I want to expand the number of certificate programs, the partnerships that we have with our hospitals, so that we're training people for the skills that they need in tomorrow's workforce. And we're going to approach that very aggressively in the months and years ahead.
So Lee, Marty is a friend, so I'm going to agree with him and diverge from him. I'm going to agree with him is in the following way, that he said online is a tool, but I don't think online by itself is a future. The future is going to be multiple tools, multiple ways of providing learning, whether it's in a residential format, whether it is in an online format, whether it is in a hybrid format, whether it is embedded in a company. We have programs that are now embedded in the company, where the company from day one is telling us, this is our need. How can we reskill people? And so essentially, we need all these modalities, whether they are residential, whether they're online, whether they're embedded, or whether they are hybrid. And that's the beauty of what we are doing, that Marty is doing that too. And so, but I wanted to make sure to go along with what Bob said. We believe that the residential model has a role to play at the undergraduate level. It's still the gold standard. For the professionals, we believe that online and hybrid opportunities and embedded opportunities are also very impactful. And if we can bring all these offerings together, then we have a winning formula, because ultimately it will serve the learner. Yeah, and different learners have different needs.
Thank you.
And I agree with my friend and senior Joseph Ayoun on that issue. But let me just tell you something. I, for one, am tired of Southern New Hampshire University, Purdue Global, University of Maryland Global, Penn State's new global program. I'm tired of New England being dominated by outside of New England online programs that are going elsewhere. And from my vantage point, I no longer want to cede that to all of these national, Arizona State, Michael Crow has done a great job with that program. I don't want to see New England students have to go to out-of-state institutions. And the truth is, all of the institutions I just met online, they've been cleaning our clock, and I think Massachusetts can do better.
Great, thank you. Hey, this is a question, it's an audience question, and I think it could go to either you, Joseph, or Bob, or both of you. And it has to do with our international students. And both of your universities have a large fraction of international students. I think maybe 9,000 at Northeastern and 11,000 or more at BU. And could you talk to us individually, singularly, about your plans to support these students and to ensure their accessibility you know, and to get over many of the barriers that they're likely to face in terms of renewing their visas and getting back into the country and so on.
Bob, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start. You know, I think one of the things that's very important as we map out the fall, and many of those students are in our graduate professional programs, is that being able to offer them the flexibility to join physically, and Joseph said this, is when they are able to do that. And by this simultaneous residential remote learning methodology that we're deploying across these graduate professional programs is designed to do that. So that the idea is that if someone cannot be here on the 1st of September, they can join the program exactly in a synchronous mode with the program. And then when they physically can get here, they can slip seamlessly into that program. You know, and putting in place the online support, the remote learning support, so that they can stay with the class hand in glove while they're doing that. We think that that's the best option to deal with the uncertainty they have. This is what I meant when I said we have to be very flexible, because we're going to have people in very different paths kind of come back and repopulate our campus. Whether that would last a whole semester for a student or a week, that depends on the visa situation and their own personal situation. And we have to be flexible to deal with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Bob. And as you heard, we have something very similar. They can join us anytime. But meanwhile, if they cannot do that, as Bob said, they can access the material. And in addition, we have a certain number of campuses, as I mentioned, not only in the United States, but also in Canada and in the UK. And therefore, you know, they can start in London, move to Toronto, Vancouver, and end up here also. We are looking at these opportunities. And we are also looking at the opportunities. If you cannot come to the university will come to you. What does it mean? That means that going back to the hybrid model, you know, we have concentrations of students in various places in the world, in Europe, in China, in India, in the Middle East. Then we can very well have hubs there where the students can also meet with our faculty and have a hybrid experience. But ultimately, they would want to come to the United States in order to have the United States experience of work and of studying. And that's what we are doing. So we are looking at it at multiple levels. We will come to you, and then we will bring you to us.
Since we are seeing really focused on technology, and you know, Pam, you've talked about the digital divide and the impact of the digital divide on communities of color, students from lower incomes and so on. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because we could talk about technology and that, but it's not evenly distributed and available to our students.
Right, and in order to get all of our students online, we bought close to 800 to 1,000 Chromebooks and laptops and multiple hotspots. And sometimes it's not even just the technology or the acquisition of the devices themselves, right? It is, do the folks who need to use these devices have basic understanding and training in order to use them well and use them at a level that's sophisticated enough in order to receive education or other kinds of information that they would need to accomplish all of the things that, you know, the gentlemen have around the table here have expressed. It is almost as if technology is another form of language acquisition, in which, you know, if we're fluent with the face-to-face and the on-ground, it takes a certain amount of training, takes a certain amount of investment to get our students and their families to the point where that's available. The other is environmental. I have students who will not put their faces on Zoom because they're studying in a closet And they do not want their poverty or their lack of resources to be exposed. So we're really talking not only about the digital divide, but a digital identity that has to be fostered in order for us to truly have the workforce that Marty talked about that needs to be developed to be beyond a certain layer of our populations in terms of privilege. It is, I think this is an opportunity though, because all of these issues are now out in the open, that I can actually say to someone, we need universal Wi-Fi, and they can understand that because healthcare is dependent on it now, as well as education, and just simple connection.
Yeah.
So I'm tending to be hopeful, but the gap is there.
It is there. Yeah. So on our campus, we had some similar problems with students for whom we had to buy laptops, and other students who didn't have access to Wi-Fi. Actually, we had to make that possible for them. And many of these students are living in very cramped quarters. You know, Marty and Bob, both of you are on the governor's reopening committee. And I was impressed that the recommendations seem to be striking a balance, or at least recognizing the relationship between the economy, reopening the economy, and health and safety, obviously, foremost. But there is also embedded in the report, I think, some attention to mental health and the need for not just reopening the economy, but reopening society, as the mayor likes to say, which I think is a better phrase, so that people can actually, you know, get outdoors and into the open air, or be able to live in an environment that feels, you know, we live in this two-dimensional Zoom world where time seems to have collapsed in on itself. And it's just been an endless day since, you know, March 13th. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, about mental health and how important that is in terms of the pandemic and what your colleges or universities are doing? I know, Marty, you and I, we've been on a couple of panels before on this issue, so.
Yeah, and actually, Lee, it was an issue before this pandemic, because I think all of us as university presidents understand that mental health has been a growing concern on college campuses across the country, and the one that we've been looking for ways to deal with that. Then add to this the pandemic. You know, Bob was kidding earlier about the fact that we get in our chair at 7 o'clock in the morning and we're on Zoom all day long until 8 o'clock at night. I can tell even in the dialogue back and forth that we oftentimes have that people are on edge, that this is a very, very difficult circumstances for our students, for our faculty. And we had better find a way to deal with that, because I don't think we even understand the depth of the psychological impact that this has had on our staff, on our faculty, and most importantly, on our students. That's why we focused on it in the report, but I think all of us are thinking about innovative ways where we can get at this.
Yeah, thank you. Listen, we've got time for one more question, and this is going to be a student-centered question, and anybody or all of you can respond to this. So we have students who are, you know, who will be graduating into a deeply recessional world, where I think we've got 33 million people unemployed right now nationally, or at least applied for unemployment. The last time I saw it was 1 in 5 or something like that, applying for unemployment in the Commonwealth alone. And so the world post-college and university is going to look a lot different in May or June of 2021 than it well, 20 than it did a year ago before this. What are you doing in your campuses to prepare students for this new world and help them? I guess their parents would say, if I was writing that letter to you, Bob, about want my kids safe and I want them at home, I'd also say I want them to have a job. Yeah. So how are we going to manage that?
One of the things that we will emerge, I hope, not too distant future, in what in my old age I call a normal recession. But it'll be the worst recession we've ever seen in our lives. And it may even be worse than a recession. Yeah. And our campuses, we figured out how to do this in 2008 pretty well. We have to do it much better this time, is pivot all of the functions we have to help people with jobs, to use to pivot our alumni relations efforts, to pivot our development efforts, pivot all of the career development programs we have toward jobs because of exactly the challenge you just put forward, Lee. The part of that I worry about is Boston University is a university that spans essentially all the disciplines. I always tell people there's a shorter list of what we don't have than what we do have. And what I worry about is that focus on jobs is incredibly difficult, as you know, on particular parts of our universities, on the humanities, on the arts, on some of the disciplines. Think of all of the faculty positions that in our doctoral research programs that people are looking for. And if you start reading the Chronicle for Higher Education and Inside Higher Education, you're going to see a steady drip of lost faculty positions. There's going to be fewer openings for people to have. There could be a generational impact here that is much more profound than what we saw coming out of 2008. We have to work at it. We can focus people on professions that we know are going to be employable. But what I worry about is our society needs all those professions. And we're getting ready to see a big bump in the road.
Yeah, I agree with Bob.
Joseph.
I agree with Bob very much. Let me mention that resilience is the name of the game. And resilience starts from day one when the students are with us. For instance, all the fastest growing demand at Northeastern is for combined majors that are combining a field in the humanities with a field in AI or a field in design. Those are where the demands are. Similarly, you have to pivot again in our lives. Lee, you pivoted. Every one of us pivoted. We were not born presidents. We had to discover that, and we had to retool. And similarly, going back to the idea that we may reach up an employment up to 30% in our economy, it is our obligation in higher education to integrate lifelong learning as part of our core mission. In this part, I agree with Marty too. And higher education has not fully integrated lifelong learning as part of its core mission. That's what we need to do, because people need to retool, people need to reinvent themselves, need to redefine themselves. And that is not only an opportunity, but an obligation for all of us in higher education.
So I wanted to jump in here for a minute about the urgency of this recovery, right? Because the community colleges, all 15 of us, is going to be sort of the backbone of a majority of the workforce. And a good portion of that workforce is going to be the 30% unemployment that President Ayoun talked about. So for us, it's planning for the short term of short-term training, getting folks back to work and reemployment in the fields of healthcare, IT, and all the areas that are the major industries of Eastern Massachusetts and across the Commonwealth. But it's also going to be not forgetting that while we're doing that short-term training, that we don't leave behind the liberal arts and the higher level sciences that allows my students to transfer to all of you. So the 3-4 years down the road, we still don't have folks stuck in just sort of survival mode of education and employment. I don't want to foreshorten our students' future because we have an outbreak. And that continuity, I think, is something to keep an eye on.
So
Lee,
there's,
if I, can
oh,
I just
Marty, go ahead.
make one point? Look, the University of Massachusetts was established as a land-grant university in 1863. Abraham Lincoln signed the legislation, and we were in the midst of divisive civil war, and the country was devastated. But we started these public land-grant universities. And if you look at our history, the land-grant research universities have always played a critical role in economic development after the Great Depression, after World War I, after World War II. So we're going to get to where we need to do because of the resilience that has been that all the presidents have pointed to. We're going to get there. So, but it's going to take ingenuity, and it's going to take tenacity and perseverance.
Okay, so there's a game show that used to have the lightning round. This is the lightning round for each of you. Your answer is going to be one word. And here's the question. I have what I call my KPAN list, the things that keep the president up at night. And so I'm going to go around the table, and you give me one word at the top of that, and then Jim's going to come in and close us out. I want to know what's on your KPAN list, and I'll start with you, Marty.
Enrollment.
Joseph.
The human factor, always the human factor. Worry about the human factor.
Bob. Bob, you're on mute.
Couldn't hear my one word. Testing.
Testing. Wow. And Pam.
Compassion.
There you go. Thank you all so very much. We're so lucky to have you as our leading the way in our higher education community. And Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Lee, and I join you in thanking all of our college presidents for their leadership in this unprecedented time. And overall, we talk about defining the Massachusetts way forward out of this pandemic. And certainly, you know, as I reflect on what I heard today, very, very open discussion about the challenges faced in each of your institutions and in higher education generally. But what I really enjoyed is the bold language of challenging your institutions and the entire academic community to shape the future of higher education, and that is the Massachusetts way, and why the academic industry has in the past led us out of these downturns, and whether it's the economy or crisis in the past. So thank you for participating today. Thank you for your leadership and your words of boldness in thinking about this issue. Before I do close, I want to highlight two upcoming chamber events. Tomorrow, May 21st at 2 p.m. is our virtual government affairs forum featuring Speaker of the House, Robert DeLeo. Many of us know that the state will face unprecedented challenges given drops in tax revenue and so forth. And many of the issues that maybe we've put aside, like education funding, like transportation, need to someday resurface. And how are we going to deal with that? And also look out for an announcement this afternoon coming up from our chamber team about this year's annual meeting. Each year, it's the largest gathering of the Boston business community, a celebration, as well as inducting people into our Academy of Distinguished Bostonians. So we'll be making some announcements about that this afternoon. You can find out more information or register for chamber programs at bostonchamber.com. And with that, that concludes our session today. Once again, thank you to all of the panelists, as well as the more than 1,000 registrants for today's session. Have a great day.